I would love to talk more about panelized construction. I think in this video, we're going to start with what is panelized construction and how it's different from stick built. Do you want me to get into that?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'll just add for everyone, Jimmy, in past jobs has experience working as a framer, and for a carpenter. So I'm excited to dive into the details with him. But yeah, why don't you get started with telling us about how panelized construction is different than traditional stick-built methods, which I presume is where you've had your hands-on experience in the past.
Yep, exactly. So I've really only framed houses and ADUs with traditional lumber. So we buy the lumber, comes in 10, 16, 20-foot sections. We have to measure it, cut it on site, do all the layout on the foundation, and then individually piece together the wall framing before we can stand it up. So it's rather labor intensive. You definitely need to have very skilled carpenters on site, and it can be prone to various inconsistencies because you're building it in the field. Whereas panelized construction, sometimes is misunderstood. It's actually the same materials. It's Douglas fir timber, 2x4s, 2x6s, and plywood. And it's built in a controlled environment in our factory, or our partner's factory in the Bay Area. And all of that is framed on site, made sure every panel is square and true. And those are then flat packed on a truck to the site where they can be stood up in sections.
Yep. And just to clarify, when you say framed on site, you mean framed in their indoor air conditioned facility.
Correct.
Actually, you and
Yes.
I went to go see a couple weeks ago, which was great.
Yeah, they have a big old table that is perfectly flat, and they can build everything in a flat packed environment or in a flat layout environment. And then all those panels are labeled just like a kit of parts, and then they're brought to site and then just stood up. So a lot of the complicated assembly of all the framing members and the window headers and door headers is done in that controlled environment. And then those perfect sections are brought onto site to be stood up.
Cool. And, this doesn't mean that there's no work happening on site while these panels are being built, right?
Correct. Yeah. So you saw today the panels going up, but before they can get to that phase, of course, we need a foundation. So while those panels are being built off-site, we're actually also able at the same time to be trenching utilities, to connect utilities, and to pour the foundation and prepare it for the panels to come on site. So it's somewhat of a parallel process rather than waiting for foundation to be done and then starting to assemble the framing on site. So typically it can save a couple weeks by going with a panelized build rather than a stick frame build.
Okay. So like 2 to 3 weeks off the whole construction process.
Yep. Yeah. And
Okay.
it's a quick stand up of the building envelope. By building envelope, we mean the walls and the roof. If you're framing outside and there's bad weather, oftentimes you're going to take a few rain delays. These panels can be stood up in a matter of a day or two, so we're not even as affected by the weather as well.
Nice. Um, to put it in perspective, so if it's 2 to 3 weeks off an ADU build, like how long is a typical ADU, and then how long would a panelized ADU take to build from start to finish?
Yeah, so a typical ADU, we like to allow 4 to 6 months. I know that's a big range. It depends on site factors and size of the ADU. A panelized kit, given that we can frame it up in a day or two, we are going to be shaving 2 weeks off of that 4 to 6 month timeline. And that allows all of the other subs to come in and start doing their work inside, like drywall and flooring and light fixtures, having the electrician come in because the building envelope is enclosed so quickly.
I think there's a lot of concerns about any type of prefab construction being of a different quality or a lower quality than, the homes we all live in, lower quality than traditional framing. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a good framing crew will be able to frame a stick-built ADU just as well as a good framing crew that puts together these panels in a factory. Um, the advantage of building it in the factory is this controlled environment means you have less room for error. You are fixing the panels with their sheathing. So in traditional framing, you'll stand up the stud walls and then you'll do what's called racking, where you want to get the walls perfectly plumb and fit in the right way. By doing this in the factory and bringing the panels on site, there is less room for error. So as far as build quality, um, some may argue that it's even better. I think it all depends on your framing crew, but a quality stick-built framing crew and a well-built panelized kit like we have developed in our factory are on par with one another.
Okay. Would you say though, like if you take an average, let's say the average framing crew and not a great one, it sounds like you're saying these panel kits are a little more precise than that.
Yeah, certainly. Again, less room for error. If you're putting the panel kit on site, you're not going to have these quarter to half inch discrepancies that may happen from an average framing crew. And in construction, those compound. So you run the risk of having an average framed ADU, and then you put the drywall up and everything's out just a little bit, and then you put the cabinets up and everything's out just a little bit. So those quarter to half inches can compound, and with the panel kits, that's less likely to happen.
Nice. Cool. Now those discrepancies that compound, what is that, how does that matter? Like, does that impact maintenance down the road? Does it impact like, I guess like building performance? Maybe you can give us a few
Yeah,
key pointers
two
there.
things. Yeah, two things that come to mind are if you've ever lived in a place that has drywall cracks, drywall is going to crack if the building's out of square and plumb. So that just means, in the future, you're going to need to reskim and repaint. Another big one would be doors. I'm sure many people have lived in a place where a door is constantly closing when you want it to just sit perfectly open. That's because the wall is out of plumb. And again, those things can be limited if we start with a very well framed ADU with the panels.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So does this higher precision come with a higher cost?
Fortunately, no. There have been times where we can actually see savings on panel kits, depending on the price of lumber and the price of labor from your GC. We've seen up to 5% savings on the hard costs of construction. So there is not a premium for going with panelized construction. Another area where our inspired ADU clients are able to save money by going with panelized projects is on the design phase. So our clients are able to see often 10 plus $1,000 in savings on design because if they choose one of our panel kits, that design has already been worked out and we're not spending dozens of hours in Revit, our design software, making those changes. Everything is already done. And and I also want to mention that that's not to say that you're sacrificing the ability to make this ADU your own. With a panelized kit, you are starting with one of our designs. The openings and floor plan of the ADU are fixed, but you're of course still able to customize all of your fixtures. There are certain times where we might be able to change cabinets a little bit. All of your finishes like flooring and tile and countertop, those are all up to you to pick and make your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add 2 points here. So I think just looking at the numbers really quickly, I think the design savings come out to about 15 to 20K for
Great.
one of our clients. So it's a great way, I would say, to work with our studio without the custom price tag. And to the point you made, Jimmy, like I'm a really big fan of finding ways to customize an ADU that don't involve the structural and permitting aspects quite as much. So it's this question of, take these floor plans that we've developed into panel kits. We know they work really, really well because we've built them several times and have refined all of the details. And then, like you said, apply your finishes to work for you. Use custom millwork and built-ins to make, exactly the storage and the types of spaces you need. And then another cool thing about the panel kits is there is an ability to do some level of swapping between doors and windows. So if we have window openings pre-designed into one of these panel kit ADUs, you can turn some of those into doors and vice versa. So, those three types of changes it's, there's hundreds and hundreds of configurations possible, even from the same floor plan. And that's a really nice way to take advantage of the cost and time savings, while still making it exactly what you need for you and your family.
Awesome. And that brings to mind that customization. Let me just share my screen. So this would be an example of the panel drawings that we've developed. This is one section that includes a high sill window. So Anamika was talking about potential for customizing openings. This would be an example where if we wanted a full height window, then we can actually drop this window sill down, and it won't change the structural engineering of our developed panel kits because we have this header height here. So that's one area where we can customize if it's within the panel itself.
Okay, well, actually, the fact that you opened up the drawings brought me to another point, which is, so these panel kits come in two variations, I would say, or maybe two different product types. So
Yeah.
we have what's called the standard panel kit, and then we have what's called a plus one. Jimmy, can you talk us through what the differences are?
Yeah, we can do this right quickly. So think of the standard panel kit as just the lumber. So it is going to be your studs, your headers, and your plywood sheathing that make up these panels. The plus one actually involves pre-wiring and pre-plumbing. So the electrical outlets that have been identified in our design are going to be installed, and Romex wiring is going to be installed as well and wrapped up so that no electrician needs to run all these wires on site. It's actually in the wall and it just needs to be connected. So similar type of Lego block building, we just connect things. The panel kit with just framing is Lego blocks with wood, and the plus one is that same framing, but also includes the wiring and then PEX, which is the plumbing system for any water lines as well.
Does this mean that the plumber and electrician aren't doing anything on site anymore, or is there still some work left over?
Yeah, I would say that this would be considered rough in, so it will take an electrician or a plumber anywhere from say 3 to 7 days to do their rough in work on site. So that's also time that we're saving. They're essentially doing the last mile, so they are connecting pieces together, and then of course once the walls are closed in with drywall, then the electrician will put in things like light fixtures and faceplates, and the plumber will install the faucet and the sink.
And maybe we'd consider it first mile and last mile, right? Because there still be underground connections to the
Correct.
street or the main home, and those happen the same way no matter what, traditional or panel.
Correct. Yeah, great call. All of those utilities will need to be done first mile and last mile. So we're taking out that middle chunk.
Really fantastic information. So the standard framing kit includes all the structural components. Did you find that to be a difficult part of the process when you, like in your experience framing traditional homes, the structural coordination with the framing, architectural, and MEP?
Yeah, I think more so a common pain point was we needed to buy a whole bunch of lumber, and if our calculations were off, we had a lot of waste. And so that's sort of what comes to mind, because we're cutting all the lumber on site.
Right.
When it comes to coordinating with MEP, that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, it is possible that the architect designed something that doesn't work with a plumbing line we wanted to run. That's
I see.
certainly possible, or if some change wanted to be made on site. So we may have a beam in a place where we need to run a water line, and that can create not only additional work, but potentially a slowdown on site because we need to change the design. Compare that to the panel kit, where think of it as we've not only written the recipe, but we've baked the majority of the cake, and we know that everything works where it's supposed to go.
Right. Right. It's kind of a forcing function to do that level of coordination earlier because you're fabricating earlier in the process before things are in the field. And so wherever those issues do occur, you're forced to uncover them faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, would you say the plus one is better for a certain type of client or a certain type of project?
So I would say the plus one is certainly better for a client who's on a tight timeline. It's going to add some time savings. Um, I would say that if you do a plus one, that means that all of the electrical outlets and the plumbing fixtures are set with the standard panel kit. There is more flexibility if you wanted to have, say, additional outlets or lighting fixtures in different places, or if we wanted to move the sink a little bit, that's more feasible if we're just going with a standard panel kit. So I would say if you're looking to go fast, plus one is the one you want. And if you're potentially looking to make changes, then the standard panel kit would be ideal.
That makes sense. Okay. And then zooming out from that a little bit, let's talk about panel kits in general. Are panel kits more appropriate for a certain type of client and a certain type of project versus,
Yeah, I think.
yeah, versus like stick build maybe being preferred depending on the scenario?
Yeah, so panel kits, going back to what we talked about, if you go with a panel kit, it doesn't mean that you can't make this ADU your own, and leverage inspired ADU and our design philosophy to make this ADU look beautiful. That being said, if you are looking for something very specific, like you have a Hampton style home with shingles and dormers, and you want that for your ADU, one that, like the one we recently completed in Menlo Park, then a panel kit wouldn't be an option because we would be starting with a custom or a blank slate and designing from there to your
Right.
needs. Um, and if you happen to want some specific feature in your ADU where you want, I think you were talking about an office and recording studio. If there's sort of a niche need for your ADU, then a panel kit wouldn't be the best option because we're limited as far as what we can change. We have almost a dozen designs that are panelized right now, and it's rare that I don't see a panel kit that would meet 90% of the needs of a homeowner. That being said, if you're looking for something very specific, then a panel kit wouldn't be the best option for you.
Yeah, and maybe adding to that, like if especially around the Bay Area, we see a lot of really funky shaped lots, for lack of a better word. And, maybe there's like a tight triangle you're trying to fit into or something extremely long and skinny. But, even for that, I like the Vine floor plan comes to mind as a great long and skinny option. So I would agree. I would say if you're looking for something with 1 to 2 bedrooms and 1 to 2 bathrooms, and we even have a few that are 2 stories at this
Yeah.
point,
Yeah,
chances are you can find something pretty darn close in our panel kit library. Take advantage of the cost savings and then use finishes and millwork to make it your own.
absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you. Yeah, great talking about panel kits with you.
You too. Talk to you later.